This video is brought to you by Vault-Tec.
Background info and initial considerations. A heroic scientist with a big heart.
Michael Emerson, the really talented, wonderful, and super sweet actor who plays Dr. Siggi Wilzig in the new show Fallout, said of the character, "He's a disenchanted loner with a big heart." See for yourself.
He's a disenchanted loner with a big heart, and he gets himself into some deep stuff, and that's a good formula right there. I'm willing to go on that journey.
And Wilzig does have a big heart. We can see that resonating throughout the entire episode. We see his big heart in the actions that he takes at great risk to himself to make the world a better place. We see his big heart in his dialogue, in the lines that he says when he's advising people with kindness. We see it in the context clues that give us hints to the nature of the place that he's working at and of the job that he's working on secretly. And we see his big heart in his expressions and his reactions, which show us how he feels all the time and when he sees certain things happening, showing us his empathetic nature. I would like to cite SMM Stories' short video exploring the character because I adore the description that they use for Wilzig too. It's as good as Michael's, really. They said that he is a beacon of hope in the wasteland and that his compassion is evident. And exactly, it is evident. Dr. Wilzig is a soft-spoken, thoughtful, gentle man, but more importantly, he is someone who is risking himself, risking his very life to develop something that he believes will help humankind. He's on this quest to make the world a better place. I actually think that Michael said something like this too, that he's a moral quester. So, he is genuinely trying to help the world, even putting himself at risk many times to do that, as we see in the episode, and we'll break that down in a little bit. If you understood Wilzig's arc when you watched the episode, then this video is gonna be basically a recap, but with a focus on his psyche and his thoughts and how they relate to his morality, and a recap that analyzes what the show did to frame him and his actions in that manner, with a couple of extra bits behind the scenes info just because I thought they were kind of fun. But if you did not understand Wilzig's arc, or worse, you totally misunderstood it, then this video is to clear things up for you so that you can see the light. I really liked Wilzig's character a lot. He is in most of episode 2, titled The Target. I have to say, going into the show, I didn't know anything about the Fallout games, but I watched the trailer for the show when it first came out a while back, and that trailer alone already told us a lot. This is what I picked up on immediately, way before the show premiered, just from the trailer alone. This is the world living in the aftermath, or the fallout, if you will, of an apocalyptic event. And you have the Vault Dwellers, who are people who live in a safer, more orderly society, and the people outside of these vaults who are living in a much more chaotic and violent society. And then from the show we learned that they're called surface dwellers, of course. And again, from the trailer alone, you can already have a pretty good inkling that Wilzig is a pretty good guy, just from the way that he is talking to Lucy in that bonfire scene. Lucy, the main character, of course. His tone is kind. He's advising her that she should go back to the vault because she's not safe there on the surface. She's not equipped to deal with the lack of rules there. He's warning her that this experience will change her for the worse. He's looking out for her, trying to get her to be safe, trying to be helpful. But of course, that's just a trailer. It could have been totally misleading. But then the show premiered, I went into the episode, and no, it turns out that the trailer wasn't misleading. Wilzig is a pretty good guy who's trying to be helpful, and he's trying to help everybody, not just Lucy, but the whole world. And by the way, yes, I am wearing a lab coat because I really do like to dress up like the character that I am talking about. And I happen to have one from university. Anyways, so because I follow Michael Emerson's career more closely, I've known for I think more than a year now that he was only going to be in one episode of Fallout, and he explained in an interview that he was actually still under contract with Evil, still is as of when I'm filming this, the week after Fallout came out. He's under contract with Evil, which is a show where he's been one of the leads since 2019, so 5 years now. He's the main antagonist there, and that contract was an exclusive contract. Technically, he wasn't allowed to be in anything else, but the people behind Evil were gracious enough to let him be in Fallout when he was approached about if he wanted to be in Fallout, and filmed while Evil was in hiatus. So, he legit wasn't allowed to do more than that. So I obviously already knew because it's just gonna be in one episode, contract reasons, but obviously I didn't know how much he was gonna be in the episode. And it turns out that he's in it a lot. I was really pleased with how much he is in it, how many scenes he has, and how important the character is. I honestly think that he has more than half the scenes. I mean, I don't have any statistics on that, but I'm very picky when I like a character, and it definitely felt to be like he is in at least half the time. And in a lot of scenes at the beginning, he is alone, so he is completely carrying the scene all by himself. Well, with the dog, obviously, but it's just the two of them. And he has some amazing, very important, very poignant, and impactful dialogue with Lucy later on, both in the bonfire and on his final scene. He even gets this beautiful sacrificial scene for the good of the world. A sketch of him appears in episode 1, and we're gonna kind of continue to see his face throughout the season even.
I mean, maybe the head will win an award, best recurring body part in a limited series.
So, this is an amazing role. It was all really amazing. I see people asking for him to somehow be brought back in season 2, and I would love that too. So let's make this happen somehow, some miraculous way.
It's possible too that he left voice recordings of himself that could somehow appear in some interesting electronic way, or something like that. Until then, there's always my head.
But anyways, even if all he does is this episode, it is a huge guest role of enormous impact and a demanding role that only an amazing actor could carry out well. I loved it. I was devastated by it for like 2 days, but I loved it. Michael was even taken with Jonathan Nolan to do a bunch of interviews for Press Week, which is a big indicator of how much they respect him as an actor and how important his role is, because usually I don't think you would take a guest of one episode in Press Week with such an important show creator. It's a big gesture, but that's neither here nor there. I'm just saying that I'm pleased about all of it. Wilzig and Michael's acting obviously made such a strong impression and had such a huge impact even in a short time. So like I said, I loved the character of Wilzig and his arc in the episode. But when I finished watching, I had no intention of making a video about it. I was like, there's nothing for me to say. It was all pretty straightforward. But then somebody on Twitter called my attention to this online article. I'm not gonna say by who or where it's published because I don't want to put anybody on blast. That's not the purpose of this. But the article starts by saying that the show establishes that Wilzig is a pretty bad guy in the opening scene because it shows him incinerating a puppy, and I was like, what? Are you kidding me? The show literally starts with the opposite of that. It shows you that he did not incinerate the puppy. He saved the puppy. He couldn't bring himself to incinerate the puppy. And then the rest of the episode frames him as a good guy. He's a good guy the entire time. Everything that he does is for the good of the people. So it's wild to me that a review, like an actual, I think, professional review, can get it so wrong and completely misunderstand the character and the scene. Beacon of hope, evident compassion, big heart, moral quester. This person did not pick up on any of that. And sometimes this happened. I'm not trying to criticize them. It's just that this immediately fired up my frustration. I'm a big Lost fan. That's the first show where I ever saw Michael Emerson in, and that's a show with a very misunderstood finale. People seem to think that the characters were dead all along and the island is purgatory, and that's not the case at all. There's a whole scene telling you that that's not the case. They also misunderstand a lot of characters' arcs. So I really have a low tolerance for that at this point. I admit that I do get low-key aggravated and really frustrated every time that I see somebody totally misunderstanding a character or a plot point. So, after seeing that, I was like, I feel like I have to talk about it now, I didn't think there would be a need to explain Dr. Wilzig because I thought that he was pretty straightforward. His good intentions are pretty clear and direct. But now I think I have to make a video because apparently some people need an explanation. And by people, I do mean literally this one person. I haven't seen anyone else get it wrong online, but I wouldn't doubt that there might be more people out there. Media literacy has kind of been in a complicated place lately. And if there's one, there's probably more, so. One time, there was this crossover between Phineas and Ferb, the Disney cartoon, and the reality show Shark Tank, where Dr. Doofenshmirtz goes on Shark Tank with one of his inventions. And one of the judges asks him what motivates him the most, and he replies with spite. That's me here, okay? That's me with this video. Spite is motivating me to record this, so now here we are. Here we go. First off, let's break down Dr. Siggi Wilzig's journey and his intentions in every step of the way, and how the show portrays that, obviously. For now, I'm just gonna go through what the show told us on that episode. I'm not even gonna take much else into account. And this is from the point of view and perspective of somebody who has no knowledge at all about the video games. So the video game is not gonna factor into this initial part of my video. This is just from the episode alone. And that's because I want it to be about how the show frames the situation and how they want their audience to perceive and understand what's happening when you have no other extra game context clouding your mind. It is a purely TV perspective. And then later in this deep dive, we'll get into actual video game lore and analyze what that means for Dr. Wilzig, and does that reframe anything in a different context or not. Plus a little bit of commentary on the fact that he shares a name with a real life person named Siggi Wilzig. Wilzig's character journey, the emotions he expresses, and his intentions. Wilzig's episode starts with him working in this place. An organization or company, we know what it's called, but let's pretend that we don't. Pretend this sole episode is all the knowledge that we have so far. So, an organization that you can tell is sketchy as hell and pretty horrible, because they're telling people to kill newborn puppies, which is the most horrific thing. Each person seems to have their own puppy to evaluate. It didn't look like a big litter had just been born. There's this huge sign on the wall stating that if your puppy weighs less than 10 ounces, incinerated. The person right next to Wilzig does just that. And right there is our first context clue to how he really feels in the first 5 seconds of the show. You can see from the way that he looks over at the person that he's not happy with this. He feels unsettled and kind of disturbed about it. He's discreet because he can't make a big deal about it. Surely he'd get in trouble if he spoke up. But he's clearly not okay with it by any means. So then he weighs his own puppy. The puppy is at 9 ounces, so she's supposed to be incinerated. But of course Wilzig can't go through with the orders. He can't bring himself to do this awful thing. Wilzig takes it upon himself to make sure that the newborn puppy can survive. Risking one's own safety to save the life of an animal is a telltale sign of an empathetic person. So the opening of the show is signaling to us, rather clearly I would argue, that this is a good, kind, and empathetic man. And as he does lie to save the puppy, there is another context clue about the nature of this place. Before he writes down the falsified information that she weighs 10, he looks around very surreptitiously to make sure that nobody is watching him. That informs you, even if you know nothing about the Enclave or the Fallout world like I didn't, that he's gonna get in trouble if he's caught falsifying results. If people realize that he is lying and pretending that the puppy should survive when, as per their orders, she's supposed to be incinerated, if they realize that he's lying so the puppy can live, he'll get in trouble, in enough trouble to make him a little nervous here when he looks around. But he still does it anyway to save the puppy's life, because he's too kind to kill her, and saving her is the right thing to do. By the way, the puppies are in a room marked Behavioral Engineering Room. Why did I say it like that? Behavioral Engineering Room, which is a more psychological branch of study and of conditioning behavior. So then the puppy is a little older, like this big, and we see Wilzig kind of run away with her. He intercepts her when somebody is walking with her. He's just like, "May I?" Probably when he wasn't supposed to be the one getting her. And he just rushes out the door with her. And he kind of even looks back to make sure that he's getting away with it. And then while he's making his getaway with the puppy in his arms, he looks at a bunch of adult dogs that are being trained in kind of a military way. And that's just a very sad way for a dog to live. I mean, they're test subjects for the behavioral engineering stuff, really. And that's awful. I think Wilzig just wanted to give the puppy a better life. So he took her and raised her as his own, and they became companions, which signals Wilzig's kindness again, breaking some serious rules to raise a puppy that he wasn't allowed to own. For the puppy has to be hidden, because Wilzig wasn't supposed to raise her as a pet. She was supposed to be trained and studied with the others, I assume. She lived in a large hole in the wall behind a blackboard and a desk that totally obscured and covered the hole. You really had to move the desk aside and roll up or push up the blackboard to be able to access the hole. They were there to hide it because people were not supposed to know that 4 was there. I mean, it seems pretty obviously a hiding place to me. Why else would it be literally behind the board, like some secret entrance? So right there, you know, for the second time in a short few minutes, or at least this time it kind of confirms it to you, that something bad's gonna happen to Wilzig if he gets caught hiding a dog companion. You don't know how bad, but you know it will be some kind of bad. But he does it anyways, and he bonds with his puppy. I saw a lot of people on Twitter saying how cute it is that Wilzig is a dog dad, and that's exactly it. He's a dog dad. He keeps Forrest safe and gives her a better life, even if it's risky for him. It's a huge and pretty explicit way to show that Wilzig's empathy and compassion is for all creatures, not just for humans. Also, right as he is leaving with her, he sees a charred human body being carted out. And again, notice his expression. It's an expression of shock and concern. His eyes go wide and he's kind of like taken aback. He's not happy that the organization is doing such things, and it seems to have caught him by surprise, like he wouldn't have expected that of them. Maybe he didn't know quite how bad they were until recently. I do think it's plausible that maybe he is only now starting to realize that they're experimenting on people too, just because he seems genuinely shocked by it. By the way, the official job title on his door is engineering. Well, I guess I should say the official department. It doesn't say engineer, it says engineering. He's supposed to be working on methodological behavior, like how different stimuli can lead to different responses, which we see stuff written about that on his blackboard. There are also a lot of mathematical formulas on the board and something about genetic engineering. And obviously he has plenty of scientific equipment there, including microscopes. Plus, the official description of the character calls him a scientist, not an engineer. They're similar things, but they are a bit different. So what I'm gathering from all these bits of information is that he dabbles in different kinds of engineering. Genetic engineering, which is under the label of scientist, behavioral engineering, which is more under psychology, and unofficially in whatever kind of engineering or scientific pursuit that allowed him to engineer that little glowing chip. Because yeah, at the same time that Wilzig is raising his puppy into adulthood, he's also working on an invention. He's creating this substance or chip or artifact or something. We don't know yet as of episode 2 if that's a substance or technology. It's a glowing blue thing. And again, he's working on that in secret, which puts him in danger as we see later. This is something that is really painful for him to inject on himself. Either he tested it on himself or he's just injecting it to keep it there for safekeeping, which I think is more likely. But either way, it was painful. There's kind of a little comedic moment where he fills a whiskey glass and then he tilts his head like, little more, might as well. And you can see, again, context clues by the way that he is so, like, he's taking deep breaths, he's steadying himself. You see from his face that this is going to be painful. And then it is, of course, he injects himself and cauterizes the injection puncture. He's groaning and yelling, and it affects him very badly. So he's putting this very painful thing inside the skin of his own neck because of how important this is, okay? Wilzig believes that he can change the world for the better with this invention. He's willing to put himself through this pain to improve the world, to make the world a better place. How many people are willing to go through horrific pain like that to improve the world or to do good for others? So again, he's risking his safety to do the right thing. He's enduring pain and using himself as a container because it's the right thing to do for the world. He's betraying his place of work and using their equipment in illicit ways because it's the right thing to do. We get a real sense that he is disenchanted with the way that the company, the Enclave, runs and with how they don't actually help the world. So he takes it upon himself to embark on a moral quest to make things better. Though more on that later, because at this point in the show, we don't know why he's making the blue glowy thing. In episode 1, the Brotherhood said that the invention can either destroy or save the world, and he clearly believes that he'll save it by giving it to the right person, but we'll only know that a little later in the episode. What we do know is that he is doing this in secret, which means that he is betraying the Enclave by going behind their backs and behind their orders, doing something that undermines them. And the way that we know that his personal research is also a secret is that as soon as somebody steps into his office or lab or, that room, he gets really tense. you see his face change. You know, he's smiling at the dog, and then the smile vanishes and he tenses up. And the guy, as soon as he sees Wilzig's invention and the dog, but mostly he was looking at the invention, I thought, he immediately goes for the alarm. Wilzig tries to block him and talk him down, but to no avail. And for a dog who is obviously well taken care and who developed a real bond with Wilzig, she attacks the guy that is hurting him. She does it to protect him, just like he had protected her all along. But Wilzig is in absolute shock. You can see by his reaction to the guy's blood on his hand that Ford transfers to him when she licks his hand, that he is not a violent person at all. He's not okay with this. He feels super bad that the guy died. And he's really kind of distraught. Just look at his face. And considering that he already probably had the plan to leave anyways, he wasn't that upset about his life being upturned and thrown into upheaval. He was upset about the death. So, you know, it's another moment of showing us that he is not a bad person. He is a kind, empathetic man. The audio of the show even does this high-pitched thing to show us how hard the situation is hitting him and how anxious he has become over all that violence. So clearly Wilzig was risking his own safety to develop a scientific thing behind his organization's back. It's something that does not align with what the Enclave wants. He's using their equipment and their scientific resources to go against their goals. And when he is found out to be undermining them, he has no choice but to run. Which, like I mentioned, he may well have already been planning to do, since he had already hidden his invention in his own neck before he was found out. And maybe he had already arranged the payment to get safe passage across the wasteland. I mean, do we really think that he had the chance to stop and arrange payment with outsiders while he was already on the run with the alarm blaring? He could have planned it out in advance. I think it's very likely that the running away to go meet Moldaver was prearranged, since his intention was always to go use his invention to help the world. And that requires, of course, delivering it somewhere. So yeah, I definitely feel like he contacted Moldaver ahead of time. The guy walking in on him probably just accelerated the timeline, so made him need to run faster. And he raised the stakes by sending everybody after Wilzig by pulling the alarm. They might have taken longer to notice that he was gone if not for the alarm. But anyways, pre-planned or not, probably pre-planned, he has to run with his secret pet, which of course he wasn't gonna leave her behind. And that's when we see just how bad this organization is and how important this glowy artifact is. They take his betrayal so seriously that they try to kill Wilzig with the freaking robot machine gun thing, which he has to outrun, and that's crazy. I mean, if you watched episode 1, you already knew that this invention is important and everybody wants it. But if you didn't watch it and you started on episode 2 like me, that machine gun really makes it clear. By the way, I had no idea what the Enclave was, and we'll talk more about this in the video game lore section of this video, but I could already tell just from this episode that they are not interested in improving the world. Because Wilzig claims that the invention he was working on is going to improve the world, and people seem to believe him because they're all really invested in either making it happen or stopping it. But clearly the organization didn't want the artifact to be invented or used outside of their control. That's why he's doing it in secret. So that made me think, okay, so obviously this means that the organization doesn't want the world to improve, and why would that be, right? This is what was in my brain while I was watching the episode. And then I assumed that the answer is because they're doing pretty well. Everybody else is in a horrible situation. The outside world is rough and harsh and hectic, but the Enclave is so high-tech and organized. Everybody in there seems to be doing fine. And I thought they probably just want to keep the status quo. Isn't that what people in power often do? They have all the comfort, and I guess they have enough currency because they don't seem to be struggling, which likely means that they have the power in that situation. So they just don't want to change things because that would mean losing their power, or at least diminishing it. It seemed like a fairly obvious conclusion to me just by watching the episode. Wilzig, on the other hand, is more interested in helping people than in keeping the status quo. Of course, later on we find out that he's working on code fusion, which could potentially generate energy for everybody and really help manage the overall lack of resources in the wasteland. So it makes sense that the Enclave would rather keep the invention to themselves rather than allowing Wilzig to develop his own cold fusion pill and disseminate it to the whole world. He wants to use it to help everybody though, and for that he betrays them, sets up a meeting with Moldaver and runs. That's why he's seen as a beacon of power in the wasteland, because he wants to distribute this powerful resource to everybody, right? Not that we know of this yet, so really it doesn't necessarily matter at this point if we're just analyzing this part of episode 2, but obviously this is important to paint a complete picture of the situation. So off he goes with a bounty on his head, and the next scene is also very telling about his morality and the quoted big heart. The bonfire conversation with Lucy is very eye-opening, hard-hitting, and I found it kind of heartwarming. He protects her. He watches over her sleeping to protect her because he saw the fire glowing in the dark, and like he tells her, she should know better because lighting a fire during the night is going to be very noticeable and it's going to attract creatures. Or people. And listen, if he wasn't there, the cockroach would have eaten her, okay? The only reason that she wasn't eaten or at least injured in the attempt is because he saw the fire first and he went there to watch over that person. He didn't even know who the person was going to be. He went there to watch over them with Thor because he knew that things would be coming for her because of the fire. He saved her life. And this is another big indication that he has a lot of empathy and that he is a good guy. He took time out of his night to keep a stranger safe. A stranger that he knows a lot about, sure, but still a stranger. And he couldn't have known that it was her when he first went to take a look. And then they talk and we know that he wanted her to be okay and to go home. He tells her that she'll be better off if she goes back. He speaks to her with kindness, he is gentle, and he ultimately respects her choice to keep searching for her dad even though he disagrees with it. He almost feels like a protective mentor to her in that scene, giving her advice on how to navigate this new world. I love Lucy, by the way. I think she is so adorable and I just wanted to add that. So then Wilzig escapes. I don't know how he escaped the irradiated bear. I guess he just ran faster than the bear came out of the cave. I do wonder if there was a scene where we maybe would have seen him escaping it just because of a comment that was said in an interview that made me wonder. But I don't know, that's probably just wishful thinking on my part. There's not much to discuss about this scene in terms of the morality of his quest, except that I guess he is noticing that the situation is going to be really rough when he sniffs the spam, I think it is. And you can see from his face that he's already kind of disheartened. So this is going to be a rough journey. And it's a journey that he's willing to undertake, again, to do the right thing. But, you know, suffice it to say, he escaped the bear. So he escaped the bear and the machine gun robot. He's an action hero by this point. So he makes it to Philly, and again, there's not that much in this part about his morality per se. He has arranged to be safely taken from there across the wasteland to meet Moldaver to deliver his invention as part of his quest to better the world. And he was willing to pay a lot of bottle caps, which is the currency. And he was willing to pay a lot of bottle caps, which is the currency of the place, in order to get the blue glowing artifact pill chip to the right place. And he tries yet again to get Lucy to go home, by the way. He was still looking out for her, even here. Then the ghoul arrives and the whole gut-wrenching leg situation happens. And oh my god, I don't even mind the gore per se. I could look at it. I did look at the cut off leg and the blood gushing. And that part, that's fine. But I don't like the suffering. So I don't like when we have to look at his face and see how much he's in pain, see all of that suffering and hear him yelling and nearly sobbing and just screaming in pain. I don't like that. I don't even like when, like, if it's a character that I actively dislike, if they start to go through something bad, even if it's like a comeuppance scene, I don't enjoy it because I don't like seeing anybody suffer. So that scene, the whole leg thing, that's a whole thing. I'm not gonna say much about that because one, I don't want to think about it, and two, it doesn't correlate as much to the topic of what we're talking about. But, you know, he goes through something gruesome and horrific, and he somehow does not pass out. Like, he's a total badass. Like, and he doesn't even waver in intention, even missing a leg, like bleeding to death. He does not waver. You know, this man is missing a leg, and yet he claims, all determined and emphatic, that he can still make the trip. He is putting his moral quest above his own well-being and physical safety. Obviously, traveling with that mechanical leg is going to be excruciating, and it's going to be exhausting. He knows this, and he is willing to put himself through it to try and accomplish his mission of delivering the artifact, because again, he's very committed to this mission to help. The fact that he trusts Lucy and wants her to take him is, in my opinion, kind of another sign that he's a good guy, though maybe less overt. He can tell that she's trustworthy. Vault dwellers in general are supposed to be. And obviously she's a very good person. That's why he picks her. He wants a good person to be in charge of this. Because he knows that she'll help save the world if she has the chance to. Like, yes, she's doing this to find her dad at the moment, but she'll do the right thing. That's all that Wilzig wants, to do the right thing, to end his moral quest. That's why he tells her that she can change the future if she takes his head. He knows that she will want to change the future for the better if she can. Which brings us to what is unfortunately his final scene. Weakened from the injury, he realizes that he is slowing Lucy down. You know, she needs to move quick or people will find them. So he sacrifices his own life in order to make sure that she can complete his mission for him. The cyanide banana peel. He explains that in a very comedic way. Props to Michael, as always, for his impeccable comedic timing and for making me chuckle in a moment where I wanted to cease existing. And honestly, I would take that pill too if I was living in a world with giant roaches that eat humans. Like, are you kidding me? That's my limit, okay? I could probably handle a zombie apocalypse. I could handle it more easily if like demons came out from hell for an apocalypse, but giant roaches? No, that's it. I'm out. That's when I'm out, okay? We all have limits. That's it. Well, unless Wilzig looked at me and said, please stay, then I would immediately fold. And I would stay. He looked so freaking stunning in that last scene. Like, how can somebody on the brink of death look so stunning? God, it's insane. I'm sorry, I'm getting carried away. So back to the plot. Before dying, he obviously tells her to take his head because that is what matters to him. Getting the glowy artifact that is on his neck to the right place. I mean, we assume that they need his head because he injected the substance or chip, whatever the invention is, into his neck, right? At this point, on episode 2, we can all kind of guess that. Since he put it there, it is still embedded in there or in his bloodstream or something of the sort, and therefore can be retrieved. I think it's safe to assume that he was maybe even already planning on being decapitated if he couldn't make the trip for some reason. And I say that because he took that giant saw with him in the bag. It doesn't seem like the kind of thing that a person would take unless they maybe had that plan in mind already. Because he knew the invention had to make it even if he didn't. It's a dangerous world. Of course he predicted that there was at least a chance that he would get killed along the way, especially with the bounty on his head. So he had this measure as like a countermeasure, a fail-safe. And it's very sad, but it is heroic. Like a tragic hero, you know? He lays down his life because there is a bigger chance that his invention will get to improve the world and be delivered if he is gone. I mean, sure, he was already injured, but there was a chance that he could have survived. There were only a certain, I forget how many, but it was not that many miles until the next city. He could have survived, but he chose to sacrifice. He sacrificed for the cause of helping others. Something that hit me really hard in both the positive way that made me feel better, but also at the same time made me feel really sad, was that Wilzig seemed very at ease when he was dying. He seemed very hopeful, and I would even say that he seemed at peace. I mean, he is smiling more and like bigger than we saw him smile in the entire episode, except for maybe that one scene where he smiles at his dog at the very beginning. He is smiling here because now he is hopeful that his invention will be used correctly and Code Fusion will be made available to all. He trusts Lucy, somebody that he has assessed to be a good and trustworthy person, to take it to where it needs to go. He's at peace because he helped improve the world. He did what he set out to do. He completed his moral quest. It broke my heart into 1,000 pieces, but it was also so heartwarming. It was said around the wasteland in episode 3 that whoever controlled Wilzig's invention would have power to control all of the wasteland. Wilzig didn't create this thing for control though. He wasn't seeking power. I mean, he gladly sacrificed himself to get the invention to the right hands. He can't control much or wield much power being dead, right? And obviously, if you give Code Fusion to the masses, the power of the wasteland is decentralized. So for him, it was never about power. He individually would have more power if he kept the invention just for the Enclave. It was not about power. It was about the potential that his invention had to improve the world for everybody, like I've said a million times by now. Doing this, he is being a hero and a beacon of hope with a big heart. Going back to what Michael Emerson said, that Wilzig was disenchanted, we can understand now that he was disenchanted with the work that he had to do for the Enclave and with the way that they wanted to keep the world in a status quo. Or at least that was my assumption during the episode, which was later confirmed by research, but we'll talk about this. So Wilzig worked behind their backs, betraying them, undermining them, and eventually dying over it, so that he can genuinely change the future and make the world a better place. More like it was before the nuclear blast. And he succeeded. As long as Lucy finishes the mission and delivers the head, he succeeded. Like I said, he completed his moral quest. The hero who set out on a moral quest completed it with his heroic actions. To summarize Dr. Siggi Wilzig's character arc, it seems impossible to me to look at anything that he did and come out of it with the idea that he's a bad guy who killed a puppy. All of Wilzig's arc, like the entirety of it, falsifying reports to save a newborn puppy, raising the puppy with love even though he had to hide her, betraying the Enclave and using their technology to work on illicit research at great personal risk, implanting his invention on himself despite the intense pain, protecting and advising Lucy, and in the end choosing to sacrifice himself to get this artifact delivered to make sure the future can change and can improve, meaning sacrificing to make the world a better place. All of these are heroic actions. Actions that show us that Wilzig is a lovely, kind-hearted man, determined to do the right thing and full of empathy. Video game lore implications and the name-sharing connection. Obviously, Fallout has a lot of lore coming from the games. Can the lore tell us anything more about the character of Wilzig? Can it change the framing of the character in any way? Yes-ish for the first question, and for the second question, no, not really. I researched this after watching the episode, okay? So if I get anything wrong, blame the source, not me. But there's this organization called the Enclave. They mentioned the name on the show in episode 1-2, saying that Wilzig escaped from there, but they give us no other information. And the Enclave is a paramilitary organization formed by people who were elite and or government before the war, who then seized power and became the new government. But they quickly devolved into fascism, including genocide and human experimentation. They are the main antagonists in several Fallout games. They consider all non-Enclave humans to be inferior to them, which leads them to want to create a pure state of what they call true humans, and they commit a bunch of atrocities. So there are some obvious links between the Enclave and a real-life hate group that I don't think YouTube would allow me to say the name of. I apologize, but of course it's the World War II German hate group. Everybody knows what I'm talking about, and more on that in a second. Anyway, the Enclave, video game villains now appearing in a Fallout TV show. They're authoritarian, which I could kind of pretty much already tell you just from how much Wilzig was looking around before he changed the dog's weight to make sure that they wouldn't see him do it, for example. So I didn't really need research to tell me that. That is informed to you in the show, even if discreetly. When I read up on what the Enclave is, I learned that they do indeed have a lot of power. The fact that they come from the old world powerful elite backs up my original gut feeling that they don't want to give up this control that they're accustomed to. Doing research about the video game simply confirmed what I already thought and what I gathered from the episode, even though I watched it without any context. That the Enclave just wants to keep the status quo, while Wilzig wants the world to change, and that's exactly it. Enclave members don't want the world to improve, unless it's on their terms and they get to keep all the power to themselves. And that's why Wilzig is going behind their backs, because he does want the world to improve, and not in the way that the Enclave would approve of. Wilzig wants the power to go to everybody. I'm not saying all this to be like, oh, look how smart I am. I figured all this out without any context. I figured it based on watching only the Wilzig scenes from episode 2 before I even watched the pilot. No, I don't think this makes me smart at all. This is praise for the show, for making things easy to pick up on, even in the subtle moments. And this is praise for Michael Emerson's flawless acting, for making all of Wilzig's feelings so clear to us just with his facial expressions and then later his words, which therefore implicitly told us a lot about the Enclave too. Even though I didn't know their name was the Enclave, because again, I did start out only watching part of episode 2. I watched the pilot later. I could still figure out everything about the Enclave just from the writing of the show and Michael's acting alone. But I swear I did watch the show properly after I went back to the pilot and then watched the pilot, watched all of episode 2 and so on. I take watching a show very seriously. Like, I honestly don't even like to be on my phone while I'm watching. So I swear I did not commit this sin, okay? Just at the very beginning, because I just wanted to see Michael's parts first. So yes, when we take the video game lore into account, we know that Wilzig worked in or for a very bad organization. But does it count as a bad thing when he was quite literally working behind their backs, going against their goals, doing something that they didn't want him to do because he wants to improve the world while they don't? He used their own scientific resources and equipment, which he would have no access to anywhere else, to make something good, something that undermined the Enclave. And he was betraying them the whole time that he was working on the glowy artifact thing. I feel like he was doing the right thing. Everything he did is because he thought it was the right thing, including sacrificing himself in the end. We don't know when or why he started working with the Enclave, or if he even really had a choice. Maybe it was for survival, or it was to use their research. If he already wanted to develop cold fusion, that was most likely the only place with enough surviving technology to get it done. Maybe early on he even thought that they were well-intentioned, and it took him a minute to notice that they do horrific things. Who knows, he was surprised when he saw that charred dead body, so maybe he wasn't expecting that. The important thing, the key thing, is that Wilzig does not share their beliefs and their ideology, and he's disillusioned with the work they do, which is why he flat out betrays them and creates something to help the world, something that will harm the Enclave and effectively diminish the Enclave's power. He doesn't want just the Enclave humans to survive, he wants all of humanity to thrive, which is why he wants the power of cold fusion to be available to all. Going back to the real-life World War II hate group that YouTube would not allow me to mention by name, I wanted to touch on Wilzig's name actually. Names in TV shows can be very significant. They often convey messages, especially when the name is deliberately chosen after a real-life person. I think it's really interesting that Wilzig shares his name with a real-life Holocaust survivor called Siggi Wilzig, who was a philanthropist, also a self-made billionaire, by the way. So obviously, as a Holocaust survivor, he survived horrible atrocities done by this hate group. Wilzig, the Fallout character, escaped from a similar fascist group, and he survived them up to a point. Clearly, the show's Wilzig is meant to mirror and possibly even honor the real-life man who did such wonderful things and endured such horrible things. If there was any doubt to Fallout Wilzig's morality, it must be put to rest now. They would not name a character who was evil when working for a fascist organization the same name that belongs to a Holocaust survivor. Like, they just would not. That would be the most insensitive thing ever. Like, it would just be horrible. They would, however, name a good man, a hero who stood up against the fascist organization with this name. This totally frames Fallout Wilzig as a victim of the Enclave. And just as the real-life Wilzig became a philanthropist, meaning he sought to improve the welfare of others and just improve the conditions of the world in general, Fallout Wilzig is also trying to improve the world. Both Wilzigs, the real-life man and a fictional character named after him, are heroes in their own way. Final considerations. Again, to reiterate this at the end, the entire Fallout show, although only season 1 exists as of now, frames Dr. Siggi Wilzig as a good guy. He's trying to do the right thing, he worked diligently to save the world, he sacrificed himself to save the world, or at least help the world improve from the harsh situation that it's in. He saved the puppy, he protected Lucy, he was willing to hurt himself to make sure that he would develop and keep safe this important artifact. The actor, who by the way is one of the best at understanding everything about the psyche of the characters that he plays, he says that Wilzig is someone with a big heart and on a moral quest. Wilzig, the character, was named after a real-life philanthropist Holocaust survivor. So if you interpreted Fallout Wilzig's journey in a different way that isn't as a heroic beacon of hope, please maybe rewatch the episode and notice how everything is being framed and actually look at what Wilzig is doing, what he's saying, and what his facial expressions are, because they tell us a lot. And notice all these context clues that we talked about, because Wilzig didn't do anything wrong. He tried the whole time to help, and several times he succeeded. Like I said, he first saved and then helped the dog, he saved Lucy, and then he helped the world and sacrificed himself to save the world. How can you have a bigger heart than that? So, at the end of it all, he unfortunately had to die for his moral quest to be completed, but he completed it. And that makes him a hero in my eyes, and definitely in the framing of the show too. He is an icon, a legend, and a king. And ultimately, yes, he is a hero with a big heart. Someone on the show owes me financial compensation though, for the emotional damage that I went through watching him suffer so much. I know I made a joke when I was drinking the banana flavored milk, But it was a nervous joke because damn, like I was really down after the episode. Like it really hit me hard. You know, later I rewatched the episode with my parents and my mom said something that I rather liked about Wilzig. In the end, she sounded kind of upset, and then she said, I wish he wasn't leaving the show. I like intelligent and thoughtful characters. I'm sick of most characters in most shows being rude or brutes. And I've seen plenty of people online asking for Wilzig's return in season 2, like I said. So what's stopping them from bringing him back? Get this iconic, kind-hearted hero back, Fallout. And yeah, that's really it. If you've never watched Lost, Person of Interest, or Evil, or literally anything else that Michael Emerson is in, I highly recommend them. He's amazing in everything. Flawless performances always, and his characters are always so different from one another. And he's just a genuinely sweet and the nicest human being. Everyone who's ever met him always praises him for being the best person ever. So I could not recommend his shows even more than I already do. Also, if you've already watched Evil, maybe check out my very long, kind of unhinged, but I think pretty decent deep dive video essay kinda on Leland Townsend, our demonically allied therapist and corruptor. I love him. Thanks for watching. Usually I only discuss things that I'm very knowledgeable about here, like Leland Townsend. You could tell me anything about him and I would have an answer for it. But that wasn't the case for this video because I definitely do lack some context and I didn't even really have a script per se for it. So hopefully this was still useful and somehow entertaining. Maybe send this to people who might either enjoy it or benefit from this. And let's all hold hands and manifest a way to bring Wilzig back to season 2. Also, leaving a like on this video really helps me. Please consider subscribing if you would like more takes from me. And mwah!